Barely. All right, I'll speak louder. Usually I don't have a problem doing that. So, and the developers will do the same thing. This is at least the second public community meeting we've had regarding the development of the Max Gerber site. We've had 2 additional meetings at least with the Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association. My zoning policy is that I refer all zoning changes to a community organization within the ward, and in this neighborhood, it's GGNA that's been around for at least a decade. I encourage you all to join GGNA, the Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association, officially as a member, because any zoning change, small, medium, or large, I refer to them for them to give me a recommendation. 90+% of the time, they give me suggestions that we're in agreement with. So we want to continue that on, but we need more members.
But you have to live in a certain area now. Tell people you have to live in a certain area.
I'm glad you brought that up. You do have to live in a certain area because we want to have local input. We have the East Village Association in East Village. We have the Chicago Grand Neighborhood Association in that area. We have the Wicker Park Committee in Wicker Park, East Humboldt Park Neighborhood Organization, and then we have the Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association as well as the West Bucktown Neighborhood Association. I have the same policy with all of them.
What is that?
I will have a very passionate discussion. Interrupting, insulting is not going to be tolerated. Period. If you're here for that reason, I suggest you leave now. If you're here to be passionate on one side or the other, that's what the first word's about, and we want to hear that. We had a first meeting, as you know, at a restaurant over in Milwaukee. A larger development was proposed, 10% affordable housing on site, some other details. I took feedback from that meeting. Most of the feedback that we got, there was a lot of feedback that was in support of the original plan. The feedback that we got that was against it was too tall, too dense. Let's move forward on something different. The community, I communicated that to the developers. Now they came back with a plan. And what I'm really, and you should look through we have a handout. If you didn't get a handout, please get a handout. I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit here. This is very important if you care about affordable housing like I do. Most affordable housing developments of this type do not do it on site. They pay into a fund, and that fund can be built throughout the city. We've been very successful in our ward at Ashland Division, at Milwaukee and Ashland, at west of Ashland on Division, at Milwaukee and Tallman, and on this site, that they're committed to doing all of the affordable on-site. They're still committed to that. More importantly, we've pushed it even further. They're doing more than the required 10%, and I'll repeat that. The ordinance requires 10% on-site, or you build half and buy out of it. They're doing 14, 15% on-site. Another criticism we had of the plan was that the units that were affordable did not have 2- and 3-bedroom units available. Therefore, a small family would not be wanting to rent or buy in this complex. We now have 2- and 3-bedroom units available under the affordable rate. A family of 4 with a median income of $48,000 of 4 can actually buy or rent a unit at the site. I'm very excited about that. Lucha, who you know is an affordable housing developer in our area, has supported this plan. There's a letter from them. Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association has given it sort of an official vote. They like it. They're going to wait till after this community meeting. I'm excited to get their letter as well. But I don't have these community meetings just to have them. I want respectable, passionate comments for, against, or in the middle. That's why we have these. Not to waste your time on a Tuesday night or on a Monday night when you could be doing 100 other things. We want to have an open process about this.
Excuse me, Alderman, are you in
No,
charge
hold on a
of this?
second. You're not going to interrupt again.
Okay, I'm going to leave. No, I'm going to leave because you know what? It's already a done deal.
Stay,
No,
stay.
that's
Bye,
okay.
bye.
It's already a done deal.
Stay.
Who said bye?
I said bye.
Yeah, why don't you take a hike?
Bye.
Thank you. We have
How much
received.
money did you get?
We have received a lot of great comments through email, phone, through this community process. Good, bad, and indifferent, and I respect everybody's comments that have been made, and we've given those to the developer to come back with a plan. Some people say that tall buildings are out of character in our ward. That's up for debate. But I'll tell you, excuse me, But I'll tell you what's out of character, are vacant lots. Vacant lots are out of character for our neighborhood. They are ripe for problems, they are ripe for issues that none of us want to see. And this TOD ordinance that they want to apply to, I passed. It's progressive development. It was written up in the Chicago Tribune on Sunday at Ashland Division. Same developer, a streaming success, 10% on site. So all those comments that a lot of you have made to my office, calls, emails, or in person, I respect, for or against. This is the kind of crap I don't respect. These flyers that littered our neighborhoods for weeks, passed out by people that are cowardly, that won't even put their name or email address on it, so that my volunteers in my ward soup had to go out and clean up all this stuff for this misinformation that's sent out. So if you're about this, that's not what this meeting's about. This meeting is for me to hear from my community and my residents, who I'm proud to represent, a development that I think, according to Commissioner Mooney, is going to bring the most affordable housing here. And another thing, I want you to think about this, and then I'm going to close. I've talked too long. Density, if we keep density low, like Lincoln Park, if you're for affordable housing again, that, by statistics, is going to generate more gentrification quicker. We don't have the housing stock here, the competition won't be here, therefore landlords will be able to charge higher rents, and those that can afford our great neighborhood are only going to be those who can afford a single-family home, and that's not the vibrancy that we want in our neighborhood. It's not that. So you actually work against yourselves, not my words, others, if you want low density and affordable housing. I really want people to listen to the developer, ask him all the questions that you want per the cards. If you have a question, please write it down. We will read your question out. If it's repetitive, we will not. But let's get on to the development, the new development. I appreciate all of your time tonight. Again, I know you could have done 50 other things. It's great to see so many people out here. That makes me really proud that people are interested in the neighborhood. So thank you very much.
If anyone needs a comment card, if you could raise your hand.
Okay, again, thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Rob Buono. I'm here with my partners Paul Unigard and Jamie McNally, and our project architects John Heiner and Mike Kendall from Wheeler and Kearns Architects. I'm going to try to move a bit around the room tonight, just so I can maybe get back and you guys in the rear can hear a bit. While trying not to block what we're going to show you. Since we last met in October, as the Alderman noted, there's been some meetings. We've also had several meetings with the city's Department of Planning and Development. And in particular, we've been focused on tailoring the plan, in addition to some of the items the Alderman mentioned, is conforming the plan to what's known as the Milwaukee Corridor Plan, which was something developed independent of us actually in 2007 and 2008 that brought together the city, a lot of community representation, a professional planner, and ultimately was a plan that was adopted by the Department of Planning and Development. We're going to go through some of those details tonight, and you're going to see it pop up here and there. Some of the things are going to certainly appear minor in comparison to some of the bigger issues where there has been a bunch of discussion, but nonetheless, some of our direction, one of our masters, the City of Chicago, has focused on this plan pretty carefully. Accordingly, you're going to see a lot of little details around that plan, but also some of the bigger things that the plan addresses, like affordable housing, like transit-oriented development, that plan discusses in a fair amount of detail. When we were first here in October, our plan wasn't really specifically tailored that. Frankly, we hadn't really gone through what I think is nearly a 100-page document that is very detailed and very specifically talks about the property that we are currently proposing to develop. I also know that some, maybe many of you were here at the last meeting. Those that were not, we're going to go over the plan. I think it's going to take us about 15 minutes. We're going to start with comparing, no pictures, just data, comparing to what we showed in October to what we're proposing today. We're then going to move on to just a brief discussion around the Milwaukee corridor plan. We're going to be addressing some of the specific things that were raised at our GGNA meetings. We're going to go through those actually in some detail. We'll get into the pictures. We have brought a model with us that after we can go through the presentation so you get a sense of what we're thinking about, you have a chance to look at a scale model of the project. And then I'm happy to try to answer all the questions that people have. I'm happy to hang out here as long as we might need to. And we also have a Spanish translator here tonight to the extent that somebody requires that. Alyssa is her name, she's sitting up here in the blue. We can make her available, particularly during the question and answer session. So that is available. So with that, let's get right into the comparison. I'm going to just step over here, you guys. I want to stay out of the way. And you guys up front, I know I'm yelling a bit. I'm just trying to project my voice for the folks in the back. And I'm going to talk about some of these things out loud because there's no way I can see this from that far back. So, John, can we take this any bigger?
Sure.
We were expecting to be in a larger room, so. Okay. I'm going to say it out loud so you guys will be able to get, you'll be able to understand exactly what it is. Let's start with the height of the project. When we first made our proposal, we had two buildings. We still have two buildings. We refer to them as the north building and the south building, the north being at Belden, the south at Washington along Milwaukee. The north building was at 15 stories. It's now proposed to be at 12 stories, which is a reduction of about 33 feet in height. The smaller building at Washington, the south building, remains at 11 stories. You can note there's a very, very minor change. It's not material, but we had just some minor changes to the parapet walls. So we have a couple of feet difference, but that otherwise is the same. Now, for the number of units in the building, on the north building, we originally proposed 176 units. That has been reduced to 135 units, which is about a 23% reduction in the number of units in the taller building. Whereas the smaller building, it remains at 78 units for a total proposal of 213 units, or about a 16% reduction in what was originally proposed. Our parking has dropped slightly, and you'll see why in a few minutes. It has to deal with how we've addressed some of the issues surrounding the retail. We've gone from 71 to 68 parking spaces. However, because of the reduction in density, our parking per unit has actually gone up from 0.28 to 0.32, or about a 14% increase. Okay, the affordable housing. There's a lot of information here because we're working actually outside of both the old and the new ordinance. One of the reasons we've been a bit delayed in this is just seeing how the new ordinance, which was just recently passed, was going to sort itself out and how it might apply to our project. We're actually exempt from the new provisions of the affordable housing ordinance. Nonetheless, not only are we adhering to them, we're actually exceeding them, as the Alderman discussed a bit earlier. So we're going to divide it into what's required under the ordinance and what we're doing in addition to it. So the general rule is 10% of your units, and that fluctuates. If you have more units, more general units, we have more affordable. If we have less density, we have less affordable.
Do you have that in writing? Do you have that available, or should I take notes?
We'll get you what you need, okay? You don't have to take notes, all right? Just see us here, we'll get you what you need, all right? So we were originally at 10%, we're now at 13.78%. Now, that brings us to a total of 29 units, of which, under the current ordinance, I've got 21 units. We're actually required to do 22 units. I didn't realize that the city even if the decimal point is 0.1, they've decided that they round up. So this actually should be 22 units, which would bring us to a total of 30 units under this configuration. And this is really where the important change takes place. When you look down here, we originally allocated just under 12,000 square feet to satisfy our requirement. 12,000 square feet of living space, divided up mainly among one-bedroom units, some one-bedroom plus den units, and some studio units. In response to the request that we have larger units, one of the reasons up here in the larger building that the densities come down is we've created larger 2- and 3-bedroom units ranging from about 1,100 to 1,200 square feet, two bedrooms, 2 baths, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, what we're calling workforce units. And what has happened as a result, we have increased the square footage available for affordable housing by approximately 75%. So while the percentage is going up 3.78%, the actual square footage due to the larger units has gone up by 75%. To put it in perspective, the slightly over 20,000 feet of affordable housing, living space, is more than 2 floors on, it's actually 2.5 floors of the proposed north building. On the south building would actually be 3 floors, because it's a much smaller building in terms of what we call the footprint, how many square feet there is on each floor. So that represents, we think, a meaningful increase in the amount of affordable housing. And incidentally, all of this is codified as part of an ordinance. Unlike some zoning changes, this one's a bit different in that it's an actual ordinance that's not just simply changing from one zoning to another, but rather says all of this information is in it, along with a whole host of other information, including all of the renderings that we're going to show you tonight. Those are also all part of an ordinance that effectively codifies what we are talking about here tonight. Okay, one of the things that we've done in response to, because this is about a 450-foot long piece of property along Milwaukee Avenue, we've tried to spread the retail out a little bit to, so to speak, connect the 2 towers a little bit more. So we've increased the retail by about almost to 9,000 feet, or about 11%. All that retail is at the ground floor at the respective corners that you'll see in just a moment. And I think that this discussion is better had with the pictures up on the wall. At the bottom here, we have a number of things, important things that were raised by GGNA, and I'll go over each of them that we are attempting to address. One is that, as you all know, there are other projects planned along Milwaukee Avenue, some of which may be under construction at the same time, and there's been some concern about how all that gets coordinated. I suggested to GGNA the other night we would be happy to take a leadership role in coordinating with the other contractors about minimizing, first of all, use of side streets, if and when any streets or parts of streets are going to be closed, particularly around Milwaukee Avenue, that we're all coordinating that together so we don't end up coming to a standstill. We haven't organized that yet. I actually don't know who everybody is in that, but if we go forward, we're prepared to do that, presumably in concert with the Alderman's office. Note, though, that we do have the benefit of a very large piece of property, nearly an acre, and as a result, much of our construction, unlike some of the smaller ones, can actually be staged on our own property. We will not be on Belden and Washington. We'll primarily be using Milwaukee for truck traffic coming in and out. Not to say that there won't be zero disruptions, but we have a better chance of doing a good job of coordinating things because we have a big site. Funding a centrally located green space. One of the things you'll see in our plan is that we've made some changes to how we're handling Milwaukee Avenue. I think the pictures will tell a better story. We've also noted to GGNA that as a result of this project, we are going to develop, if it were to go forward, significant amount of real estate taxes would be generated, nearly $270,000 to $300,000 a year, which is part of the TIF in which this area is designated. We are not using or proposing to use any TIF money or other public financing, but we are literally will be creating millions of dollars in additional increment that could be used in the community at the community's discretion. That's not something we're involved with, if green space is deemed important. Local employment, we divide the employment opportunities into two categories. One is construction, the second is whatever retail may end up there. With respect to the construction, we've told GGNA that if we were to go forward, we will organize with our general contractor, who is presumed right now to be Power Construction, a very active firm in the city, that we will host effectively a job fair with the subcontractors that are selected for the project, recognizing that it is a union project, and anybody that is hired on the project would have to be a card-carrying member of whatever union trade was working on the project. And that really goes for every single thing on the project. There really isn't any exceptions. That's just the rule of a larger project. But we're certainly prepared to coordinate that through the community, and we've done that on other projects, so we're familiar with doing that. Also, what's been raised, there's been some issues raised about the alley behind the property. For those of you that live over there, you know that the alley is in certain areas in a fairly significant state of disrepair. We would certainly be redoing the alley and paving it as the first part of this. And then, because like others, we would be using the alley to access our property, we're committed to maintaining it, mainly from a snow removal standpoint. That seems like that happens now every year, that we would be committed to doing that, and we've made that commitment to GGNA. As to other maintenance, I think that's largely it. New alley, snow removal. Finally, there's been some discussion around the pedestrian crosswalks, primarily at the intersection, because of the offset at the intersection, especially how Belden comes into Milwaukee. There's some concern about how people going to and from this project will decide to cross the street. Recognizing that we can't control how everybody crosses the street, but we have worked with the city's Department of Transportation and a traffic consultant about some ideas there, which are fairly simple ideas. And John, do we have this up here next? You guys are all familiar with the intersection, so on crossing Milwaukee on California, that crosswalk has largely faded. CDOT now does their crosswalks a little bit differently. I think they're called ladder or high-intensity crosswalks, which they would propose that would be done here. We've made the commitment to help them financially with that. It's a fairly minor thing from an investment standpoint, but at least gives a clear markation of where one should cross the street. The concern is that people leaving the L will cross the Cozy Corner parking lot and shorten the distance that they have to walk. That still may happen. This isn't an absolute prevention of it, but at least it gives us some markers for that. Similarly, the issue was raised. This photo doesn't show it, but if you look at a lot of the Google photos, often this intersection is blocked by cars stacked on Milwaukee Avenue. There's 3 or 4 cars. We've been asked about incorporating what we see in some intersections, just to keep clear sign on the road. And again, something that both the traffic consultant and CDOT concur with doing. Slightly minor improvements, but we think at least bring some organization for pedestrians to the intersection. All right, we're going to move in some of the pictures.
Same details. These people are here to hear the details.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You want to sit with the group back there? Yeah. Is there a group of folks back there where Lisa can come back and help out?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back. Is that? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Would you like us to, is there a suggestion here that we pause for a few minutes?
Probably.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
There's a couple of chairs that I'd like to help you.
The whole Milwaukee corridor plan, which I think it's 98 pages long, is available online. I don't have the URL in front of me, but that can easily be made available. I think the important thing to think about here is, or to focus on, is the way it's organized, which is around a larger vision, and then broken down by a development framework, and then a whole bunch of development guidelines for the area. And it just doesn't relate only to our property, but a lot of properties along Milwaukee Avenue. This is all divided into different nodes. In the parlance of the plan, we are in focus node C, which is noted right down here. Importantly, there's a strong focus on transit-oriented development and the benefits around that were developed through this kind of visioning community process that was done now about 7 years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. Down here you see that there are two different concepts, concepts A and B. We're going to get back to those in just a little bit to talk about how tall buildings might be and how they might be built on the property. Concept A focusing on ones that are smaller, concept B focusing on ones that are larger, more similar to what we're proposing from the standpoint of how the property is built out. Again, we're going to show some of those things diagrammatically rather than try to go through an explanation for them. These are all the development principles, and later on the 10th one they go into a whole bunch of guidelines which talk about compact and mixed density, designed for people, not cars, involving the private sector, promote diverse housing options, creating public spaces, promoting pedestrian connections and innovative uses along the public way, develop retail that is market-oriented or market-driving, establishing landmarks and gateways along Milwaukee Avenue, and finally promoting environmental best practices. The 10th one goes through a number of guidelines, A through K. Rather than spell each one of those out here right now, you will see as we go through our plan that we have keyed where we believe we adhere to or exceed these requirements based on each of the letters A through K, and I will periodically point each of those out. Again, as I noted in the introduction, this is something that we have done over the last few months in response to some issues that the city raised, as well as some of the community issues that were raised. Okay, let's go to the pictures now.
Rob, can I just interrupt to say that
Yeah.
the questions are going to be very important, so I don't want to rush you, but
I'm going to move it along now. All right, I got it. All right. You guys know the property. The only thing I think to focus on here is it's an unusually shaped property. The way it narrows in the middle and obviously is bigger at the north and south ends, which is why the buildings are orientated at the north and the south, because it's where they fit as opposed to the middle of the property. This is just a diagram showing the different transit-oriented development locations that are happening right now along the city, which are primarily happening between Grand and Belmont, with a big focus in Grand, Division, and Ashland, and right now, California. These are projects that are either existing, approved, or under construction. Starting with the old one at Damon and Milwaukee Avenue, known as the Coyote Building. We're just simply showing the different heights of buildings, along with the one that we developed at Division and Ashland, that we're moving from heights ranging from 184 feet to 126 feet, to a project right now at Milwaukee and Grand that's about 178 feet that's under construction, and one at Chicago and Milwaukee that's been approved, and the Ganella Bread Factory is moving, as I understand, to a different location, so they're not under construction yet. This shows the transit-oriented development 600 feet, only to demonstrate that our property is well within it. In fact, it ranges from about 225 feet to the front door at the north building to just over 400 feet to the entry at the south building. This is the general site plan, noting that what you see in gray is what we call the footprint. That's the size of the buildings that are being proposed. This building to the north is about 11,000 square feet. The building to the south is about 7,600 square feet, so considerably smaller. Whereas the portion in white here, this represents covered parking, while the parking in the back is off the alley, which goes back to the earlier comments about maintaining the alley. You can see along here all the different notations regarding our compliance with the corridor plan. Examples of that are bringing the entrances to the building so that they're covered for the residents, to building out the retail to the street, to incorporating the retail with the streetscape, which we will get into more detail a little bit later, making sure all the parking is behind the building or otherwise not visible from the street. Same thing with loading and garbage, that is all enclosed. That's happening here and here. No curb cuts on Milwaukee Avenue. We have none. The project has 2 curb cuts, one on Belden, one on Washtenaw, in order to access the 43 parking spaces and the loading and other back-of-house operations. Per the plan, all the retail is designed to accommodate restaurants, which primarily means making sure that we have the right systems organized for exhaust, which these do. And all of the detail down here, which is this kind of streetscape public area that we've created, we're going to go into in a little bit more detail in just a moment. Go ahead. This is looking at the second floor of the project, which is just moves us up obviously to the second stories of the buildings, as well as this open area here, which is a combination of green space, in part required by the city, some in addition to that. In the back, a dog run for residents of the building, as well as, and this is another thing that we worked on since we last saw you, is making sure all of our stormwater detention is organized on the project, much of which is occurring here. This area, which again we'll show you in a different elevation, is designed to create a major green area that is relating to the pedestrian area. It's actually inaccessible to both public and private users. And I think I covered it. Oh, one thing I should note, here at the corner, and by the way, the dotted line here represents our property line, so you can see the difference between the public way and the private. But in 2 locations, here at Milwaukee and Washtenaw, and then in the middle of the green area, we've actually recently entered into an agreement with Chicago Sculpture Exhibits, which is a not-for-profit entity that actually curates sculptures around the city, rotates them on an annual basis, and we have enrolled in that program so that we can have one here at Washtenaw and the other in the middle of the property. Again, something that's called for in the corridor plan, which is in the incorporation of landmarks of public art. Incidentally, the art hasn't been selected. Okay, this gives you, now we are in the middle of the property. The distance between the 2 buildings on the street is approximately 160 feet. We have taken the sidewalk that is approximately 12.5 to 13 feet and nearly doubled it to 25 feet. And we have incorporated first along the sidewalk a number of new landscape planters to help define the area, make it more interesting, we hope, make it more attractive to the public. You see a series of benches coming off here, intended to give people an opportunity for a place to sit, congregate. The incorporation of a number of different landscape areas in between those benches, again, to try to soften the space some. It's also, as you will see later, how we deal with the wall along here, which is something that people have raised. Also, each of the retail spaces here at the ground floor is designed to be incorporated into this space so that we can have outdoor seating that can effectively mix with the public space that people are using. Again, that would be furnished by individual retailers, but nonetheless, something that is noted as a requirement in the Milwaukee Corridor Plan. We have added things like trash receptacles, bicycle racks, again, along Milwaukee Avenue. And you will see later in an elevation that pedestrian lighting is something that's talked about somewhat extensively in the plan, that we've developed a whole lighting plan along Milwaukee Avenue, and incidentally, to a lesser extent, along the alley. So, this might not be immediately obvious what this is. We've cut a section through the building, so if you thought about yourself walking up Milwaukee Avenue, what you would see in different places, and this is in the background obviously, but what we're trying to demonstrate to you is here the 25-foot sidewalk streetscape area that's been created, some of the new plantings, you can see them here, bike racks here, the trees, which incidentally the trees along Milwaukee Avenue are in pretty good shape. The expectation is those will be cleaned up a bit but saved. And this is that area, the landscape area that we talked about, this somewhat of a hill or slope that works really well for planting because we can get deep soil in there and therefore we can get trees and ivy and other things to grow that become beneficial to both the folks in the private outdoor space that we're required to provide, along with people along here feeling the benefit of it if you're on the street. Incidentally, back here just shows you that's the dog run that drops down into a lower space in the rear above the parking. Another big part of the corridor plan is environmental considerations. Our project will have a minimum of a LEED silver certification or the equivalent certification. There's some other ones floating out there. Part of that is 50% of the roof area needs to be green roofs. We are complying with that, and this is just showing you on the roofs of the 11 and 12-story buildings, along with some outdoor space on the roof, as the project right now has effectively no balconies or terraces. So in order to meet the requirements of outdoor spaces, we're doing that by the lower roofs, the lower roof and the upper roofs of each building. If you remember on the second slide, we talked about some of the things in the corridor plan. We talked about concepts A and B. What you're seeing here on the left, just a conceptual drawing. And if you read the plan, this is not written in stone that it ought to be like this. It's merely just talking about how more density and more height is envisioned for this property. When you look up here, this is where Cozy Cafe is, the existing dollar store, and then the older dollar store along this property, which suggests that at some time in the future, that's all going to be owned by a single entity able to do that. Whether or not that happens or not, I can't predict. Whereas this property, ours, is showing a combination of 9, 4, and 7 stories. It's showing a -5 zoning, which is what's suggested in the plan and for which we have applied for. One of the things that we've done, and you'll see this a bit later, this is showing a building that's much taller in the middle, where ours is much shorter. We've pushed the bulk out to the corners and eliminated it going all the way back, and you'll see shortly why we think that's important more diagrammatically. This, our project is shown here as proposed. Again, this on the Cozy Corner Dollar Store properties is just simply showing if the plan were built, how it might relate to our project. I would also note that one of the other design elements of the corridor plan suggest a consistent architectural treatment, which we've obviously done here, and you'll see that in the pictures. The incorporation of bay windows, which we've done on the front building, as well as a curtain wall system, which is a fancy way of saying a certain kind of window wall system, which actually we have done here. This is showing a hypothetical development if you were to do 4 stories at the property line as suggested by the plan, which is intended to show the effects of a narrow sidewalk and a larger, more bulk up against the pedestrian experience, which is somewhat in opposition to many of the other components of the plan that talk about emphasizing the pedestrian experience. You know, recognizing that a giant gray wall is not something anyone's ever going to build. We just haven't programmed that. It's just simply to give people an understanding of what the differences might be between the two. Whereas you can see here, we're showing the larger streetscape sidewalk, the area that's planned for the public's use with landscaping and seating. And you can see up above, per the section we showed you a bit earlier, that because of the nature of that space, as I said, we're very confident about planting this. Normally, developers show pictures of plantings that look like they've been there for the last 30 years. They're usually growing up. It's much harder to do, especially on a busy street. Trying to grow ivy is super challenging, mainly because of the snow and ice. Whereas we have real control up above here that allows plantings to grow down, and obviously to incorporate larger trees up here. These vertical bands, to go back to something I noted earlier, are intended to bring lighting to the space, and we'll show you that in another graphic in just a few minutes. And this is what I noted earlier, the relationship between the potential retail spaces and the outdoor area. Again, in the corridor plan, suggested, not necessarily saying it would happen, that along Washtenaw, which is right here, across the street is the Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we're showing a 7-story building built in the back of the property, and that creates and obviously a different sense of how it might feel as you're moving up Washtenaw. What we're showing on our project, where we've moved some of the bulk closer to the corner in a smaller building, as I noted before, only about 7,600 square feet. At grade, the building is set back about 18 or 19 feet from the alley or the property line, and about another 30 feet up here to give us about a 50-foot setback on Washtenaw for the folks behind the property. This also is showing the entrance off of Washtenaw. Okay, next. This is incorporating the public art, just a guess of what it could be on Milwaukee, but just noting the location so that it can be installed. And this just gives you a better picture of the curtain wall or window wall system, which is primarily glass and metal. Oh, that's all right, keep going. Again, a rendering showing some of the lighting that we're thinking about. One of the things that was raised was the blankness of the wall as we originally proposed it, so we've made it shorter, we've incorporated more landscaping and this vertical lighting to break up that experience, and we hope even in the evening to make it more attractive to folks wanting to hang out there. This shows you a potential perspective looking down Milwaukee Avenue from the north about how the building at Belden would appear, and not much more than that. This is looking up Milwaukee Avenue, so at the corner here is Washtenaw. Again, bay windows, these are actually suggested in the corridor plan. Noting my comment before about developer license on Ivy, that won't happen very quickly. We think it can happen with the right kind of planners. And then I think the remainder of the things would be largely redundant, you guys. For those of you that were at the first meeting, and we've done this at GGNA 2, we've prepared some shadow studies. Actually, we're done for this time of year, in the spring equinox and the fall equinox, as opposed to the extremes in the summer and the winter. And the dotted lines you're seeing here are representative of the former taller building. We are showing these in approximately 3-hour increments. So at this time of day, you can see that this building is that the shadow is just beginning to encroach on the first building at Belden, whereas there really isn't encroachment in any of the yards on the other buildings. We are at 10:53 in the morning on this particular shading study. Moving on to a little bit in the early afternoon. We're now just before 2 o'clock. The reason we chose this is now it has passed the first house entirely over that period of time. And again, the dotted line shows the original proposal against the other. I should also note that the darker shadows represent the existing shadows created by the existing buildings. We did not incorporate the Max Gerber building into this as how that might have been. Whereas the lighter gray shows shading from our proposal. And you can see here, it's just starting to make its way across Washtenaw and into the front yards of a couple of these buildings. And let's move ahead to later in the day, to the final one. Pardon me? Go ahead, I forgot what that is, so tell me what it is.
Well, we also mocked up the proposed massing from the corridor plan,
Right.
and so.
I remember all
You
those.
want,
Yeah, when we showed the massing plan earlier, under the corridor plan that shows what happens when really trying to demonstrate, even though the building is shorter, when it's built wider, the impact of the shadows, how they begin to more impact this cluster of residential buildings, and still nonetheless approach the front yards of the buildings on Belden. Yeah.
that shadow encroaches already at 10:53 a.m.
Right.
So effectively, these properties under that plan are in shadow the entire day.
Okay, let's skip to. Now we're at about 5 o'clock, and you can see from obviously this is under the corridor plan. Again, just a suggestion, but nonetheless we just model it so we can compare. Here you can see the impact between our building and the existing, between the light gray and the dark being existing. Obviously the shadows get longer as we get later into the day. The area most impacted by this is the shopping center and the Kentucky Fried Chicken. Find themselves in more shade, and much more shade today more than they do today. Okay. This is going back to a slide we showed earlier, which incorporates our proposal in comparison to some of the other buildings. The dotted line up here represents the first proposal and the approximate 30 or so feet reduction. And this, what we're suggesting starts to be more consistent with what we're seeing along the blue line south of us. And I think that's it. That's it for the moment.
Okay, we've got collected many cards. If you haven't, the staff will collect your cards. There's some repetitive questions so we'll ask the questions only once. And if you come up with questions during this time, just fill a card out, pass it on up. Most of these are for the development team. And the first one is, it's actually a two-part. One is, has the Center for Neighborhood Technology reviewed and commented on the proposal? I'm right here.
Oh,
Okay. Oh, all right. So, real quickly, who you are and...
Hi, I'm Kyle Smith. I'm with the Center for Neighborhood Technology. We have reviewed this proposal where we know that this is a contentious building, and we're here because we support TOD as a neighborhood development strategy. I know there are a lot of questions about this development, but in general, we're supportive of TOD because it's a strategy that saves households money. Transportation costs are less at this location than other areas in the city. It connects people with jobs. You can access 80% of the city's jobs within a 60-minute transit commute of this location. And it reduces traffic and improves the climate. So as you consider the merits of TOD in your community, we really urge you to weigh the benefits of this project.
Okay. The second part says, how will this project impact gentrification in comparison to similar sized projects elsewhere?
Did everyone hear the question? Read it again.
How will this project impact gentrification in comparison to similar sized projects elsewhere?
So when you look, when we look through the corridor plan, it talks about diversity of housing, and that could be interpreted in lots of different ways. It can be interpreted as we're going to do a lot of different single-family homes, probably not on Milwaukee Avenue. Our interpretation of that is let's think about the diversity of a population that we can attract to the building, given the kind of unit types that we're thinking about. that range from smaller to larger, studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3 bedrooms, and that we take about 14 or 15%, actually much more of that on a living space, and we allocate it to different levels of affordability, to at least bring what we would think is some economic diversity to the project. There is also 2 and 3 bedroom market rate units that are going to attract another form of household. So we're trying to mix up what's here at the project.
Why does the rendering look like a bunch of frat boys?
Sir, you can write a question down.
I did.
Okay, thank you. This one's for me. How will neighbors outside the first ward be included? We live less than 3 blocks away, but in the 32nd ward, so we're allowing everyone to ask questions. We're not asking what ward you're from, but I would encourage you. There's a project in the 32nd ward on Milwaukee Avenue where the Aldi is being proposed. To attend that meeting, from what I've read, there's only 2 units that are proposed if affordable housing is important to you on that site, which is much, much, much less than the 10%. So the 32nd ward residents, you know, we can't just go by ward boundaries. We've got a mixed up ward. We want everyone in the neighborhood's perspective on these types of developments.
I asked that question.
Your handout.
I found out about this meeting because of those inflammatory flyers.
Okay, thank you. Your handout is. Your handout is pure propaganda. Where is the development data? I think. Why are there more units than TOD allows? Max 50% of parking, 61 cars equals 122 spots. Is that correct?
So, yes and no. The parking the parking requirement under a strict TOD would say that for every 2 units you need 1 parking spot. Yeah. The density as proposed here is consistent with the zoning that's proposed, which is the B3-5. Because we're going to a planned development, what I talked about earlier, which codifies everything that we're talking about, the benefits of that, it's codified. The benefits to the developer is we get some flexibility to modify certain of the parameters that are generally required under the zoning. In this case, we are seeking a reduction in the amount of parking that would be required if we did this without the planned development process. And in part, that is driven by the number of affordable units on the site, which, as I noted before, 29 or 30 units, depending on the final unit count, that we have found, particularly in our experience at Division and Ashland, where incidentally there is no parking, that we think about 17 or 18% of the people there have parking, who incidentally are renting spaces in another lot, that even with the parking proposed here, there will not be the demand for that parking.
Got it. How many linear feet of retail space will face Milwaukee relative to the overall length of the entire project from Milwaukee Edge? Did you hear that, Rob?
Yeah.
And then I'd also like you to talk about the rate that you're looking at charging for that retail space and what you're looking at doing in terms of people that can afford, local vendors that can afford this retail space.
I could use some cards. I need about 10 since you're the only resident that gets to speak freely.
Okay, we can get some more cards.
You don't even live over here.
Okay, so, John, what's the total length of the site again?
460.
The total site is about 460 feet long on Milwaukee Avenue, and in between the buildings is about 160. So the remainder, approximately 300 feet, is devoted to retail frontage. This little spot here is included in my 300 feet. We haven't actually built the building there, but it's where the retail goes up to almost up to that corner.
I got this a couple
Oh
questions.
wait, no, I didn't answer the other part of the question. Did you ask me the rents?
Yes.
Let's start with actually, I don't know yet. I don't. We think the rents will range, and again, I hesitate a little bit because it depends how much investment we make in a particular tenant. The more we invest in terms of helping a tenant prepare their space, the higher their rent. The less we invest, the lower their rent. So we think the range is somewhere between $28 and $34 a square foot annually which is based on a per square foot basis, paid annually for the space.
That's a retail?
Retail.
I got this a few times about the children at Goethe Elementary School, and eventually the children live in the neighborhood attending that school.
I got a question about Goethe Elementary School, Goethe, and the children that are attending that and the future children that will attend that neighborhood school. So Goethe, so everyone knows, fantastic school in our ward, is a neighborhood school. So anyone that lives in the neighborhood in the attendance boundaries will attend that school by right, not by test, not by anything else, as that school has risen to a level 1 school. If you live in the neighborhood and the surrounding area, the attendance boundary, you are required, if you want to go to that school, the school is required to accept you. I got that
school has a
few
waiting
times.
list. They don't have any more rooms.
Right, so we have a waiting list at the neighborhood school. That's why we'd like to support Chase School. That's why we're supporting Diego School. That's why Moose School is getting an international baccalaureate program to push up those great schools as well. And hopefully we'll get a new school at Von Humboldt that, as you all know, I just came out in the paper supporting the plan to put a neighborhood school at Von Humboldt that was unfortunately closed. We need to continue to work on our other neighborhood schools that are doing fantastic work. Here's one that's been repeated several times. What will the AMI be, that's the area median income, be for the affordable housing units? How long do you, the developers, have to
Commit to that.
hang on for the affordability of these ARR units?
Okay. The answer for the time period is the ordinance requires us, before we get a building permit, to actually record a covenant that restricts all these units to 30 years. And with respect to the AMI, it is 60% of the adjusted median income, which is set by HUD every year. The Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development sets those standards every year. The city follows those standards. By way of example, today, in order to qualify for these units, you would need to earn $30,400 a year or less, and there is a process by which the city verifies.
43.
Pardon me?
60% is $43,344.
Not for a single.
For a family of 4. Family of 4.
I'm going to get to that. For the smaller units, which are typically not occupied by families, it's just over $30,000 at 60%. When you move into the larger units for families, like the 2-bedroom units, that's right, it goes up. When you work into some of the 3-bedroom units, and we are proposing on the workforce units that is going to be a higher AMI, 80 to 100% on the additional ones that we're doing. The income guidelines go from $50,000 to $70,000, which opens it up to a slightly wider variety of incomes. But those are for households, not for individuals. When we get into the larger units.
As you mentioned, the 60%
If you'd like to have an answer question, you can submit it.
It's related.
Everyone else has to do the same thing. I have to respect everyone here. So please submit a question. I'll get to it.
I did, if you're not reading it.
I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
Are you gonna read all of them?
I'm gonna read everyone I got that's not repetitive. What length of leases at the Ashland Division building? How many renewals versus tenant turnovers after 1-year lease term so far? There's another question.
Okay, I'm assuming that all the leases in the building generally are 1 year. There's some that are a little bit less, there's a few that are a little bit more, but assume 1 year. The renewal rate, and we have leases coming up at different times of the year, has ranged as high as 77% and as low as 55%, depending on the month.
So they're concerned about the tenant turnover. Do you have any? You've only had that building for a year and a half. What is your turnover there?
Our turnover right now, our average turnover when you put it all together, is at about 67 to 68% retention, so that we are turning over about 30% of the units.
This question, why not put a crosswalk at Cozy Corner? Cozy Corner is the deli there, why not put a crosswalk there?
Because it's not signalized.
We'll see, so a CDOT will not allow it.
No way.
Okay.
No. We asked the same question.
12 stories would be the tallest building for the entire neighborhood. What is the justification for such a drastic zoning variance? Zoning laws exist for the specific reason to protect neighbors from overzealous development.
Well, I think. If you look at, as we showed before, let me actually take a step back. I think zoning laws are here for lots of different reasons, and the zoning laws in this case are, at least from what we are suggesting here, is an attempt to be consistent with what the city's already adopted, and that is the Milwaukee Corridor Plan that we've discussed now more or less at length. That we're attempting to design a project that is nearly entirely consistent with what that plan called for. This is not a plan that we developed. This is a plan that was developed by the city and the community. Now, there may be disagreements about that plan, but zoning laws typically tend to follow plans. And this is one of the plans that, while the existing zoning in place doesn't comport with that, in part to give the community and the city control over what happens, but nonetheless, we're trying to follow that plan.
Okay. The cost of $1,250 for a studio will have a huge impact on surrounding rents and will generate new demand, preventing prices from falling. And then they talk about the affordable units if they're increased.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I'm going to read it verbatim. The cost of $1,250 for a studio will have a huge impact on surrounding rents and will generate new demand, preventing prices from falling. And are you increasing the affordable units? I think you've answered that.
Let every neighborhood resident speak. My name is Noah. I live in the 30th Ward.
Sir, if you're going to get, these are the rules of our meeting. Your voice is no important than any others, okay? We're going through this. Thank you.
Demand come into the neighborhood which will not reduce prices. 100%
Sir, if you don't stop talking, we're going to ask you to leave. Thank you. Thank you.
I am going to
Thank you.
out of my neighborhood because you are not listening to every resident's concerns. You're not taking them into account.
For the apartments. I asked, I have lived in this community for 10 years and I have 2 small children. We already get weekend traffic from the bars. If there are high-rise apartments, can be safely We've talked to a local Lucha affordable housing with a great reputation in this neighborhood. We've pushed this up above 10%. It's at 14%. You go to another community that's building affordable units at that percentage and this square footage.
So there are 0 units that are affordable to families.
You're going to be asked to leave. I'm sorry. These people's opinions are not less important than yours.
You're not allowed to keep saying fallacies. Speak truth or let the rest of us
We're trying to have a respectful conversation. Okay? These are the questions and they're being answered. If you don't like the answer, that's okay. And if that's okay, Bickerdike also has given their support to the affordable elements of this. We've done a
Yeah,
great
that's
job, and I'm
one
proud
part.
of it. Now, if you want to do more, I hear you. But this is what's on the table. Please respect the neighbors that have taken their time and are not interrupting what we've set up as this meeting. I have lots of questions to go through. Yours is not any more important than anybody else's here. I'm sorry, okay? Couldn't this building be, could this building be wider and shorter with the same density? I think you talked about that, but
The answer is, yes, it could be. We don't think that that's what works here, and we've showed you why we think it doesn't work and the impact it has.
oh, that's good. Having gaps in the street fabric in this area is inconsistent with surrounding buildings along the corridor. Parking, that part would be a dead space. So below grade
I
parking.
understand. So, the answer is two parts. We showed you the streetscape design that we are proposing that runs about 160 feet between the two buildings, which is an attempt to effectively create open space along Milwaukee Avenue that is available to the public. And that is extended by the green space above to try to create what we think would be a very nice park-like atmosphere, nonetheless at grade at the sidewalks. Regarding parking, once we start going below grade, there are two significant issues about going below grade. One is the parking becomes very inefficient because now we're building lots of ramps to get down below grade. The second is that in a project of this type, given the number of other things we're doing, the economics of going below grade and removing all of that soil from the site and parking underground gets to be both complicated from a structural standpoint and from an expense standpoint. And given the limited amount of parking, we view the opportunity to create open space at grade and above by effectively bringing the parking structure into the project.
Okay, next question. Will Fishman manage this building? Not done yet. As they do Ashland and Division.
No, and they do not manage Ashland Division.
Okay. Why is the developer, using a master plan that was developed before the recession, and they say without community input, but so would you do you know who, I wasn't going to that, do you know what community input did that have, what groups, individuals, and why are you using that master plan?
Let me ask the last question. We're using the master plan because that's the plan that the city has and it's attempting to follow.
And the neighborhood.
On the second part, there's a long list. I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if we brought it with us. Of all the people that it's listed on the plan. There are a number of
Raymond will find it.
all right, civic, business, professional planners, neighborhood, just folks that live in the neighborhood who participated in it, business owners. There were real estate developers involved, transportation. There was a wide range of people. I think there were 40 or 50 people involved in that planning process. There may be some even here tonight who were around for that. I did not participate in that, so I can't exactly tell you the dynamics of what went on there.
Okay. How can you educate the population on the fact that more density is better, and with more density, the better opportunity there is for affordability? Are you educated? I think that's more of a statement. Who elected? I'll answer this
By
question.
the way, I agree with that, but that doesn't probably isn't educating anyone.
Who elected any neighborhood group to the city zoning committee, and why do they seemingly have the power to stop the betterment of the city? If groups complaining about high density were around like this in 1927, Northwest Tower, Coyote wouldn't have been built. So at the beginning, maybe you missed. I have my policy, and it's not an ordinance or a law, but our policy is that we have a local community organization reviews every zoning change, and in this area it's GGNA, and they present their ideas and their suggestions to me. We work very well together. It's a volunteer organization. They're not a city entity. They have bylaws. They're structured. I encourage you to join them. I would say 90+% of the time we're in agreement. They go through a community process.
doesn't attract this many people when it's a single family home, but we still take the same necessary steps to look over that. And so they're not an official entity, it's the policy that I have. If some of you remember 2 Aldermen ago, there was not much of a community process. The last Alderman put one in, I continued on with it, and I'm willing to tweak that community process at all times, but what I'm not willing to do is not have a community process on these developments. Okay, the shade study shows most of Belden being in shade all winter. What is the plan for snow removal for the residents affected?
You mean the snow removal from the sidewalks, you think?
The stage study shows most of Belden being in shade all winter. What is the plan for snow removal for the residents affected?
Other than the removal of snow from the alley and the removal of snow from the sidewalks and other, the public and private spaces, we're responsible for that around our property.
No, I
And here's
actually wrote that, and I was referring to the actual street itself.
It'll still be responsible of the city of Chicago. The public.
We're not gonna plow the streets.
Here are the groups that were in, because someone said there wasn't any community participation, and the Milwaukee Avenue Plan. Logan Square Neighborhood Association, Milwaukee Corridor Task Force, Linda's Creation of Flowers, that's a business community TV network, Cooper Common Partners, Aragon Theater, Revolution Brewery, Preservation Chicago, EDC of Logan Square, a couple more businesses, the Congress Theater, some neighbors, West Bucktown Neighborhood Association, Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association, more residents, more Greater Goethe Neighborhood Association, cycling clubs. There's about 40 or so entities here that participated in this plan over a couple of years. You can take a look at this if you like.
There's also 2 parts to that plan, Joe, A and B.
Yeah, we talked about both of them, Joe. We talked about both of them. They showed slides on both of them.
No, we only compared it to.
I was on that. We only showed concept B, that's correct.
See.
Why did you soften your building at Division and Aspen?
So I think that's an architectural question. That building went through like this, an extensive community process, and ultimately in the back and forth discussions and negotiations, that is the design that resulted, and it's a design that we're comfortable with and proud of.
This is a 3-part question. 2 have already been answered. The 3rd one has not. Don't these tall buildings, your tall building, attract transients, including renters, subleasing their apartments as bed and breakfast units?
So the answer is, unless you are diligent, vigilant.
You're not an educator.
I'm clearly not. That actually, it's not the bed and breakfast, it's Airbnb. The good news about Airbnb is it's public, and we regularly monitor that. And it is an issue that if it is not monitored and not addressed, not only in the lease but regularly enforced, it can be a problem. We do not want that happening in our buildings. That raises a lot of obvious issues that we wish to avoid because people didn't sign up to live in a hotel.
Okay. So we saw this shadow study for one particular day. Why did you pick that particular day? And what about the other 4 days of the year? Since the sun, you're not an educator, since the sun's position in the sky changes. It actually doesn't change. The sun's position doesn't change. Go ahead.
There is that minor issue. We can pick any day of the year that we wish to do these. As I noted when we were describing it, we pick the middle of the year, in the spring and the fall. If somebody wants to see it on other days, we're happy to do it. We don't have time for 365 slides over 24 hours a day. We pick it because it's the middle of the road, and we know that it's going to work better some days and worse other days from a shadow perspective. We don't pick the extremes because they're the extremes.
What market research, this is a bunch of questions that were similar to this, if not the same. What market research is there to show the want for this development?
vote.
So,
Community vote.
They did.
Let first ward residents take a vote.
We're still, people have more questions, sir.
we conduct, I would say, market studies as opposed to market research, maybe it's the same thing, about our sense of what demand is, and we believe that demand is very strong in many neighborhoods throughout Chicago for this type of development, which we believe is accurate given what's happening currently in the city. Part of development, though, too, is us believing that we're correct. We can look at lots of market research. We can look at lots of market research. The research might be perfect. Things might not turn out as well as we think they're going to. But we believe that across the city, particularly with a TOD-orientated project, that there is substantial demand for this kind of product along the blue line in Chicago. And we believe that from just the success of our own project down the street.
I actually wrote that question, and there's another part that asks, there is a lot of residences already for rent in the area who are being marketed as luxury apartments, and they're not rented, and they are buildings that
That's
are actually...
that is the risk of the developer. They have full capacity. At Ashland Division, a very similar project. This has come up a couple times after you entered the AMI. I'm confused about the AMI topic. I'm very interested in it. Please allow for questions to clarify, so we can clarify that.
So when we talk about AMI, adjusted medium income, it goes. There's a whole chart. It's published. It's online. It's really easy to find. You're shaking your head, but it actually is online.
I found it on my phone in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's
You're
public.
comparing the HUD AMI. We're talking about people who live in the area. There's you can check the U.S.
I am
Census and
following-
the local track. The
I am
AMI is
required to
distinct
follow-
from the HUD.
I
You
am
are, but
very-
you're making a ridiculous profit off of the HUD one that is doing zero to keep
Ridiculous
your
one, right?
constituents in the neighborhood.
Support from organizations like Lucha and Bickerdike. So those are
That was a
long,
trade up for Tierra Linda. No, we're talking about this. We're talking about the 30
no, we're talking about this
project.
project. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to argue with you. Look in your folder, and if you want to take it up with those organizations, there's a letter on there. Okay.
Actually, I have a question because I wanted to see
Uptown and South Loop, this has come up with a very similar question. Uptown and South Loop also have mid-high rises adjacent to L stops. In South Loop, many went unpurchased, so it's kind of like this market study question. And in Uptown, traffic remained congested. Why do you believe that this will be different from the precedent already set by these properties? And there's a second part, but go ahead on that one.
So I'm much more familiar with some of the experience of buildings in the South Loop that were developed and completed in 2007, 2008, 2009. Every one of those buildings was developed as a condominium, and many of them, as we all know, were not successful. And the reason why those didn't succeed is because we experienced a severe financial recession. The kind of projects that are being done today that we're all reading about in the papers are being developed generally as rental buildings, which have different unit layouts, different amenities. They're very different from the condominium marketplace. There's very actually little even financing available to try to pursue condominium development. So we're seeing a different type, a different unit type, a different demographic. We're talking about many years later with a different type of economy, and we're seeing these units fill up throughout the city, and we think that can happen here also. Just purely from an economic standpoint, we think that can work. There's other issues, of course, that come into play, but we are not personally going to undertake $60 million of risk on a whim. We'd like to think that we have been thoughtful and intelligent about assessing our risk to be able to do that successfully.
Okay. Follow up to the Fishman comment. Fishman's website lists 1611 North Division, Ashland Division, as an address they rent. What is their control of that building? What will their control of 2293 tonight, North Milwaukee, be or not be?
They have no control over Ashland Division, no control over this, and our building is probably listed on 25 different websites across the city that rent buildings, because rental agents are always trying to represent properties in any way they can, because that's how they earn commissions.
And this is a good question. We had the original on my website. We're going to put this plan on the website after the meeting. It will be on my website. Why is it not on our website? We put these sort of plans on there. This will be on there tomorrow as well, the whole plan. There's a couple questions about that. What are the elevation studies that show that this structure is 3 to 10 times? Where are the elevation studies that show that this structure is 3 to 10 times the size of other nearby buildings?
I think, pardon me, I mean the renderings, but we also have this, that shows the buildings are running. Why don't we open that up?
No.
Not yet? Okay. We have some,
No one's going to be able to see
they're not going to be able to see it. So we have scale models that show that we've shared before, and we have some of it here tonight. And if you look at, do we have the ones that show some of the blocking, the scale models around us? The corridor plan?
That's not what it is.
It's not what exists today.
It's an imaginary.
No, you guys, wait. I'm sorry. This large building here, this does not exist. Agreed, and it wouldn't.
Neither did the thing across the way either.
No,
Well, it has to show it.
This was being shown to show what was being recommended in the corridor plan, not to show the existing conditions. This represents existing conditions, for instance, along Belden. Similarly, here along Washtenaw, not along Milwaukee Avenue. We have others like this that we have rendered that show all the existing conditions that we're happy to share.
We don't want that.
Okay. How long will this developer take into consideration Section 8 voucher holders and in accepting their voucher without discrimination?
Well, we can't discriminate. Well, the building is not specifically enrolled in the current Section 8. I can't remember the term. I think it's HC housing certificate. I can't remember the last word. We're not specifically enrolled in that. In order for us to properly accept certificates, our unit has to be inspected, the building has to be inspected, it has to go through approvals by the CHA, and so long as we meet those, we're happy to accept them. And I wouldn't see any reason why we wouldn't pass those inspections.
Okay, this is pretty similar, but they're concerned about, this person's concerned about too much affordable housing in the neighborhood, and would you be open to reducing the amount of units?
No.
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay. This one wants, some of these are about, they want 50% affordable, 30%, 10%. That one wanted less than the 14%, way less. Is a city sewer, this is a good question. Is a city sewer and water and gas constructed to handle this much increase for demand? There are many projects proposed like this. And then also talk about what you have to do in terms of improvements, sidewalk, and you touch on at the beginning, but what you're putting into the improvements of the public way.
Let me answer the question about utilities. City water is not an issue. Gas provided by People's Gas is readily available. On projects of this size, we put a booster on the building because of the way the gas comes into the streets. People's Gas isn't going to make any changes to that, so we actually boost it on our property at our expense. Electricity is readily available from Commonwealth Edison. The stormwater issue, which I just referenced very briefly earlier, is entirely, per the city's requirements now, is entirely detained on site. And it's done in a number of different ways. It's done with the dog run, it's done on the roofs, it's done with underground piping. There are a number of ways in which we store water runoff water from rain, which is effectively equivalent to what happens in the suburbs when you see those pretty detention ponds around the big office buildings. We effectively do that, but you can't see it on the property. Wait, oh, the public improvements. I think I talked about the alley earlier, that has to be repaved. Obviously, there is all the landscaping, all the sidewalks along Belden, Washoe, and Milwaukee will be replaced. There'll be some curb and gutter work. There's the crosswalk work.
Okay.
That's all things that we're going to be doing.
You say the residents of this project will not drive. Are they legally bound to not own or rent or lease a vehicle?
No.
Right. We cannot do that. What we did at Ashland Division is we put it in the lease. The Marshfield Neighbors, so the Wicker Park Committee and East Village Association supported the project. The Marshfield neighbors were extremely concerned that even though we had it in the lease, the permit parking around the area, the Alderman's office can give an exemption to those that do not live on that street. And I, committed to not doing that. I haven't even had to deal with that because in 18 months, 99 units that turned over 30%, so about 120 different renters, one person came to our office for a parking permit exemption. And of course, I didn't give it to them. Let's see, what was that? They're talking about why the CHA Blue Line station shouldn't be expanded more. Not really questions for you. Why wasn't it made handicap accessible? That was due to landmarking and other things that were happening in California when we redid that, preservation, etc., for the handicapped folks. Do you have more? There's been a couple of comments about the residents' opinions before development starts. I think that's been answered in the Milwaukee Avenue plan that was done proactively by the many entities that I laid out, many that are here tonight. And again, on that note, I really encourage you, if you'd like, to get involved with GGNA. Again, they're the group that we go to talk about developments of all sorts. There were, this is already been answered. Okay. So there are a couple questions that I'll answer. I've answered them at other things about contributions from developers to my political campaign. Those are all public. You can review those. And while you review those, that's great. That's what they're there for. I'd also, if you wouldn't mind looking at not only the contributions I receive, but the payments that I give to neighborhood groups, like the dog park, like Haas Park, where we are now, like Goethe School, like the street festival that we had on Milwaukee Avenue. I'm very, very, very proud to contribute many, many, many dollars to our local groups that are definitely in need of those dollars to continue some of the work that they've done to bring this field here, this field house here, and other things. Those are questions that has nothing to do with the developer that I'm more than happy to answer one-on-one as well. They do have a model here, and they're going to stay and answer more questions one-on-one. I want to talk about the process moving forward. I have not made a final decision on this. I said that last time. Hold on a second. I'm talking, don't interrupt me, please. Please. This has to go through a planning process with the city. Planning development process has to be approved by that. If it is approved, if this is approved, and then that's approved, it then has to go to a zoning committee meeting. That's step 3. It will have to be approved in that committee. After that committee, it will have to be approved by the general 50 aldermen on the council. So there are relatively four steps, including one that would mean that they are, and I'm looking forward to getting written comments. The ones that I put in your folder I've already gotten from some organizations. I'm looking forward to getting more from that. But I will say this, it's very, very, very difficult to say no on things. It's harder to try to come to some kind of compromise that I know everybody in this room is not going to be happy with. I get it. I live next door to affordable housing across the street. I raised my family that way, and I grew up in it. It's very important to me. It might not be enough for some, but it's way more on objective that's been supplied by any developments private that are in the surrounding area, or I would argue citywide. I would encourage you to read Commissioner Mooney. He's a commissioner of housing and development with the city. His comments in reviewing this. I'd encourage you to look at the actual 3D elevation, it really is more telling than the 2D up here. I'd encourage you to ask more questions of the developer. We've been here about an hour and a half. I'm going to be around for a little bit longer to answer questions specifically. My email address, ward01@cityofchicago.org. My ward night tomorrow night, 4 to 6. I have almost every week. I want to hear from you. As important, this Thursday at Revolution Brewery, I do First Ward Thursday to the First Ward. Please come by. It is not a meeting. It is not a fundraiser. It's something I host. Again, money I raise. I buy you a beer. Revolution buys you one. And it's a great way to meet residents and for you to come talk to me. If you hate the plan, you love it, or you're indifferent, what I'm trying to communicate is this is not the end of the discussion. I will have to make a decision sometime soon. I'm waiting for an official letter from GGNA. I'm waiting for others that have said that commented said they wanted to put their formal concerns in writing. I'm waiting for that. But this does conclude.
Why don't you take a vote?
We're not going to vote.
Take a
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Here's the problem. Here's the challenge, and I get it with taking a vote. Is that the people that emailed me for and against that aren't here? We didn't say there was a vote that was going to come out of this, and I have an organization, GGNA, that's going to give me a vote.
It's not the one person from the GGNA zoning committee who did not support this plan.
The other people on that committee. That's what I want to know.
4 others
How do
did.
you know them?
By
How
being
long have you known them?
By being alderman.
Yes.
So here's the situation. If we vote and it goes 40 to
LSNA,
41,
Children's for Preservation. There are many other organizations
40 to 40,
besides a
excuse me,
small
ma'am.
group.
If
That
the
was
vote goes
10 years old.
if it goes 40 to 41, excuse me, if it goes 40 to 41, is that telling? And if the vote goes the way you don't want it to go, are you going to respect that?
Yes.
I have to make a decision, and I'm making a decision on
Small
two
neighborhood
things.
organization
It's
with
not fair.
5 people.
It's not
giving their
fair.
opinion.
It's not
That's
fair.
not fair. That
It's not
doesn't
fair.
represent Logan Square.
Take a vote. I really appreciate everyone coming. Please take a look at the 3D development.